Hello and welcome to the online learning session. Today we will move ahead in chapter 1. Let us see the topics to be covered in this lesson. The first topic is the outbreak of the revolution, States General, the tennis court oath, National Assembly and Constitution, France becomes a constitutional monarchy. Students, we have already seen an era of mass awakening brought about by these following philosophers. Now today we are going to start from the effects of mass awakening. Students, we have seen that the ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in public areas, and these public areas consisted of salons, coffee houses, plus the ideas also spread among people who could not read and write, and this was by the people who read aloud in groups for these kinds of people. Now, an important development which takes place here is Louis XVI was planning to impose further taxes, and this generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. Okay, now we have already seen that the complete burden of taxes was on the shoulders of the third estate, so definitely this would generate anger and protest against the system of privileges. Now we see that in France of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power. He did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of the States General. Now we learn two things here. The first thing is that in the France of the old regime, the Louis, the king of France, did not have the power to impose taxes on his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of the States General. Now what is this States General? Let us try to learn that. The States General was a political body to which the three estates sent their representatives. It means that States General was a political body. Today you see parliament, legislatures, so you can consider this as a legislature of that time, of 18th century. So a States General was a political body to which the three estates sent their representatives. Now, however, the monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting of this body. And obviously we have learnt he usually called a meeting of this body when he had to impose taxes. The last time it was done, it was in 1614. Now student, you can realize that Louis XVI ascended the throne in the 18th century in 1774. Clear? And here we see that the last time States General was called was in 1614, the 17th century, almost a difference of 100 years. So you can realize that whenever this Louis had to impose taxes, the States General was called. We also see that on May 5th, 1789, Louis XVI called together an assembly of the Estates General to pass proposals for new taxes. Here we only need to pick up this date. We have already seen that he called an States General. Where did this States General take place? It took place in the Respondent Hall in Versailles. Now Versailles is a place in France. Clear? Now let us see some important developments of this event. The first and second states, if I ask you the features of this States General, so you will go with these points. Okay, so we see that first and second states sent 300 representatives each. Now follow me very carefully, students. The first and second states sent 300 representatives each, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides. Now, how will this look as? For example, let us consider this is side 1 and let us consider this is side 2. So clergy sat this side and faced this side. Okay, and the nobility sat on this side and faced the clergy. This had 300 members, and the second state had 300 members. Clear? Let us move ahead. While the 600 members of the third state had to stand at the back. Now the third state members, the 600 members alone, 600 members were that of the third state, and they had to stand alone at the back. See, they are standing, they are not being seated. Okay, let us see. The third state was represented by its more prosperous. It was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. Peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly. An important point to be noted: peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly. However, their grievances and demands were listed in some 40,000 letters which the representatives had brought with them. Now you understand the basic setup of the States General. Here we have 300 members of clergy, here we have 300 members of nobility, and the rest of the 600 members of the third estate stand at the back with 40,000 letters comprising grievances and demands of the people from the third state. Let us move ahead. Now let us see the system of voting. We will see here the system of voting, which actually became the bone of contention between the third state and the combined first and second state and the monarch and the rage of the third estate representatives. It was the system of voting in the States General due to which third state got enraged and walked out in the tennis court to take an oath. Now let us see. Voting in the States General in the past had been conducted according to the principle. What was this principle of voting? Principle that each state had one vote. Now we will try to understand the system of voting here, students. Try and understand the system of voting with me. Okay, now let us see. This is clergy. This is one state having 300 members. This is nobility. This also has 300 members. Okay, now let us see the principle that each state had one vote. So this has 300 members, this has 300 members. Despite having members, each class had one vote, each state had one vote. So clergy has one vote, and nobility, the entire section of nobility, which comprises 300 members, and the entire section of clergy which comprises 300 members, has one vote each. This time too Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice. Now it says that this time too Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice of keeping one vote each for each state. Okay, now let us see what the third state, but members of the third state demanded the voting now be conducted by assembly as a whole. Now here the third state puts forward a new demand. They want the voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole. Let us see, where each member would have one vote. This is a very important point. This is an important point here, which each member would have one vote. Now if the entire section of clergy comprises 300 members, the entire section of nobility comprises 300 members, so 300 into 1 converts to 300 votes. As per the demands of the third states, 300 votes here, 300 votes here, and 300 votes plus 300 votes, it means 600 votes for the third state. I hope I am clear. If I am not, let me repeat. What did the third estate actually demand? They put forward a demand that now the voting should be conducted by considering assembly as a whole. They now say that we shall consider assembly as a whole, where each member has one vote. Each member would have one vote. So if each member has one vote, it converts to 300 votes for clergy, 300 votes for nobility, and 600 votes for the third estate. Now you can see an equal distribution, an equitable distribution as far as voting was concerned. This brings a more fair and more rational, system of voting. Now let us try to understand why this system could have been much more rational and fair against the older system. Now when we consider the older system of voting, it had actually given one vote to the entire section, to the entire estate. So the clergy and nobility had one vote each, one vote here, one vote here, and one vote was there with the third estate. Students, we have already seen that clergy and nobility used to pass any kind of resolution together. They always agreed upon almost everything. Since they had a lot of power, they were closer to the king. That is why again here they would have voted in the favor, and if clergy would also have voted in the favor and nobility would have also voted in the favor of king, they would have given 1 plus 1 is equals to 2 votes, and therefore the third estate, which had one vote, would have always remained in minority, and these two states by majority of 2:1 would have already and always won. That is why, in order to bring a more rational form of voting, or a more rational and more fair system of voting, they said, in spite instead of one vote each for the entire section, for the entire state, you give us one vote, give one vote to each member of the assembly. So now let us consider this system. By the earlier system we would arrive at 2:1. Why, sir, why 2:1? Students, it's a very we need to apply common sense that clergy and nobility will always favor each other, and they will always vote in favor of the monarch. That is why one vote from clergy and one vote from nobility on getting combined comes to 2. And while the third estate would have always remained in minority, therefore always losing in the Estates General. Now the system was, if one vote is given to each member, this is nobility, this has 300 votes, being one vote given to each of its member, and this is the third estate having 600 votes because it had 600 members. Now, since clergy and nobility used to favor each other, and let us assume that they voted in favor, so if and only if each member voted in favor, then they would have gone to a total of 600 votes. But what if only one member would disagree from either clergy or nobility? Let us suppose that only if and only if one member disagrees from either clergy or nobility, this goes to 299. Plus 300 comes to 599. Clergy and nobility goes in minority, third estate goes in majority, and it wins. That is why king was not favoring this system of voting. And do you think, by the way, the king would have accepted this system of voting? No. Simply no. Now let us see what happened when he rejected. When the king rejected the proposal, members of the third state walked out of the assembly in protest. Now we see that members of the third estate walk out of the assembly in protest. The representatives of the third state viewed themselves as spokesmen of the whole French nation. On 20th June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. They declared themselves, what did they actually declare themselves, student? They declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution from France that would limit the powers of the monarch. Some more important developments, let us see there. They were led by Mirabeau and Abbé. Mirabeau was born in a noble family but he was convinced of the need to do away with a society of feudal privilege. Now let us see what did he bring. He brought out a journal and delivered powerful speeches. Abbassius, originally a priest who wrote an influential pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? Now they were actually led by Mirabeau and Abbassius, despite one being from noble family and the other being from clergy. They firmly believed that the society of France now should do away with the special privileges, especially the feudal privileges. So, on 20th June, in an indoor tennis court, now this is the scene of the indoor tennis court at the grounds of Versailles. This is a tennis court in which the people, the representatives of the Third Estate, have assembled, and they have declared themselves the new government of France as National Assembly, and they have sworn not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France which would limit the powers of the monarch. Lots and lots of points here. So 20th June, the tennis court oath takes place. Third state representatives form their own government as National Assembly, plus they swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution. So they also swore at that point of time to draft a constitution for France which would limit the powers of the monarch. And who led them? Mirabeau and Abbassius. Let us move ahead. But students, well, this was on one hand going on in France, the drafting of the constitution and the National Assembly. The rest of the France seethed with turmoil. And what were the causes of this turmoil? Let us try to figure out. A severe winter meant a bad harvest. Due to severe winter, crops had failed. When crops fail, production goes down, the price of bread rose, and often bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. What do you mean by hoarding supplies? They started stocking all the materials, and they tried to create an artificial shortage in the market whereby they could increase the prices artificially. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women stormed into the shops. At the same time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris because why did the king order the troops to move into Paris? Because there was an ongoing development. On 14th July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. What was this Bastille? You can see very well in the picture here. Bastille was the royal prison. Now, plus, in the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. Caught in frenzy of fear, the peasants in several districts seized hoes and pitchforks and attacked Chateau. They looted hoarded grain and burnt down documents containing records of manorial dues. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. Now this is what happens when you enrage the common man, when the common man gets incited. Okay, what was actually happening in France at that point of time, students? Let us try and figure out. The whole France was in turmoil. It means the whole France was disturbed. As far as the common man was concerned, a severe winter had destroyed the crops. It meant a bad harvest for them. Therefore, the price of bread rose, and bakers often took the advantage of this situation, exploited the situation, and hoarded supplies. They stocked the supplies whereby they tried to artificially increase the prices. Therefore, we see that angry women stormed into the shops, and on 14th of July, agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the royal fortress prison named as Bastille. Now, this was the condition of Paris. Now, what in the countryside? Countryside, rumors spread from village to village that lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands. It means goons who were on their way to destroy ripe crops. Now on one side we see that climate has already destroyed our crop. Now you hire a band of brigands which were on their way to destroy ripe crops. So these people were caught in a frenzy of fear that all of their livelihood would be destroyed. Therefore, out of this frenzy of fear, they seized hoes and pitchforks and attacked Chatu. The meaning of the Chatu is clearly mentioned in your book. I want you people to see its definition and note it down. They looted hoarded grain. They found the hoarded grain and they looted it. They burnt down documents which contained the records of manorial dues. Now here the manorial dues means the dues, the payment which was about to be made by these peasants, the common man, to the nobles, to the officers. So these were manorial dues, and as a result what happened? A number of nobles fled from their homes and migrated to neighboring countries. So this was what was all going on in Paris and the countryside, France. Now let us see what was the effect of all these events. On one side, people were forming their National Assembly with their objectives of framing a constitution for France with an aim to limit the powers of the monarch. Now what finally happens? Let us try to figure out and learn. Now Louis XVI was faced with the power of his revolting subjects and finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly. He recognizes, it means he tries to do away with a bit of monarchical privileges and recognized the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his powers would from now on be checked by a constitution. Here the France enters a constitutional monarchy whereby he was made, the position of the monarch was made only ceremonial. He was now just the nominal head of the country, where his powers were actually being checked by a constitution. It means a constitution was there to govern the country and Louis XVI became the ceremonial head. Which events followed that? On the night of 4th of August 1789, the assembly passed the decree. Decree, what is a decree? It's a order. It's a royal order abolishing the feudal system of obligation and taxes. Now let us see that these systems of obligation and taxes were removed by this decree, a royal order, a law. Members of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. Now the clergy and nobility give up their privileges. Tithes were abolished and lands owned by the church were confiscated. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. Now the new government of National Assembly confiscated the properties, the lands of the church, as well as acquired assets, amounting to 2 billion livres. What are livre? What is livre? Tell me. Okay, now we will try to learn some more concepts. So here we learned that Louis XVI finally agrees to give up his power and to recognize National Assembly as well as a constitution which will check his powers. Second important thing, on the night of 4th of August 1789, a decree is passed which abolished special privileges as well as the powers of the first and second state. Therefore, the properties of the church being confiscated and assets seized worth 2 billion livres. This is actually known as the French Revolution. This was the revolution which took place in France, which turned monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. Now let us move ahead. The National Assembly completed the draft of the constitution in 1791. Now let us see, we are into the formation process of constitution of 1791. Now its main objective was to limit the powers of the monarch. We have already seen these powers, instead of being concentrated in the hands of one person, were now separated. Now powers get separated and assigned to different institutions, the legislature, executive and judiciary. Now remember students, this system of governance was given by Montesquieu in his famous book The Spirit of Laws. Okay, and this system made France a constitutional monarchy. Now let us move ahead and try to understand the features of the Constitution of 1791. Now let us see the Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make laws in the National Assembly, which was indirectly elected. Now National Assembly became a body to be indirectly elected. That is, citizens voted for a group. Now some citizens got a power for voting a group of electors who in turn chose the assembly. Now citizens chose electors and electors chose the assembly. And let us see who got this right to vote. Now this has to be, developed, understood very nicely, students. Only men who got the right to vote. The thing which we need to pick up from here is the right to vote. Who got the right to vote? Okay, so only men above 25 years of age. Number one, first is 25 years of age. Second will be who paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of a laborer's wage were given the status of active citizens, that is, they were entitled to vote. Now we need to understand these sentences. Men above 25 years of age. First condition is 25 years of age. They should be men 25 years of age, and they should be paying at least tax which is equal to 3 days of a laborer's wage. It means, let us assume you are a man and this is a laborer. Clear? Now in one day he earns 10 rupees. What will he earn in 3 days? He will earn 30 rupees. And what will he earn in 30 days? That is in a month. So 10 into 30 is equal to 300. So it doesn't matter whatever he earns in a month, we are only concerned with his earning of 3 days. So you must be, this man should pay tax is equal to what a laborer earns in 3 days. He earned rupees 30, so you must be paying taxes at least equal to rupees 30. Now only these people were considered, only these men were considered as active citizens. Then what about the rest of the people? The remaining men and all women were classed as a passive citizen. Now we also here come to learn about the active citizens and the passive citizens. Okay, the active citizens had the right to vote, the passive citizens did not have the right to vote. This only had men, this had both men and women. Clear? And to qualify as an elector, then as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. Let us move ahead. Now this constitution began with a declaration of the rights of man and citizen. Now we come to the rights. This was the most important outcome of the French Revolution. Now due to all this revolution, we have come to evolving rights for man. Earlier we did not have any rights, we were subjects, the people were subjects of the monarchy. Now this region has turned to a country. Now we are no more subjects, we have been accorded a status of citizens, therefore we have some rights. What kind of rights did we have at that point of time? The people of France had right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law. All these rights were established as natural and inalienable. What do you mean by inalienable rights? Inalienable means that the rights are not something which are very strange. They are quite familiar, they are natural, they cannot be separated, they are inseparable from a human being. That is, they belong to each human being. They belong to each human being by birth. That is what I am saying, that they belonged to each human being by birth. They were an inseparable part of a human being and they could not be taken away. It was the duty of the state. Now it became the duty of the state to protect each citizen's natural rights. Okay, now here you can see the constitution begins with the declaration of rights, and we also see a bit of pictures. Here we see the description of the declaration of the rights of man. Now let us try to read and understand some political symbols. Okay, and what is the importance of these symbols? Students, all these symbols help us generate the feeling of nationalism. They tend to unite us. Okay, and at this point of time, the feeling of a nation was very important to be created among the people of France, so that they could think for a nation and not for a region controlled by a monarch. And for them to convert a region into a country or a nation, they had to abide by certain rules and regulations, and for that they had to follow some symbols religiously. Now let us also see the second cause. A few people in the 18th century could not read and write. That is why these symbols were also developed. So images and symbols were frequently used instead of printed words to communicate important ideas. Now if you see, what is the first idea which strikes your mind? If you see this picture, if you see this image, an idea, irrespective of your being educated or uneducated, will strike your mind. So that is the point which was at that point of time tried to be utilized by the painters. La Barbier uses such symbols to convey the content of the Declaration of Right. So we are actually, for the people who are not able to read the different provisions of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens, that is what we mean by Constitution of France, these symbols were made to propagate the ideas of the Declaration of Rights. Now first one is the broken chain. Now chains were used to fetter slaves. A broken chain stands for an act of becoming free. Now since the chains are broken, all the slaves or the people from the shackles of monarchy have become free. Now we see the bundle of rods or fasces. One rod can be easily broken. You can see lots of rods here, but not an entire bundle. So it actually signifies strength, and this strength lies in unity. You saw how people of the third estate, after uniting themselves, after getting united, threw off the monarchy, his throne. Now we see the eye within a triangle radiating light. What does this eye mean? The all-seeing eye stands for knowledge. You can see some rays here, and this side. The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. So this stands for knowledge and ignorance. It meant that as far as people did not have proper knowledge, as far as they were ignorant, they were under the shackles of monarchy. Now they have broken those shackles and have come out, and have acquired a lot of knowledge. They have driven away the clouds of ignorance. Now what is this scepter? It's a symbol of royal power which was destroyed. Snake biting its tail to form a ring, symbol of eternity. A ring has neither beginning nor end. So it is actually signifying no beginning, no end. Now we see red Phrygian cap. It was a cap which was worn by a slave upon becoming free. Students, even today if you see some soldiers of France, you can even today find them wearing red caps. So what did this red cap stand for, which had its origination in the French Revolution in the 18th century? It was a symbol of becoming free, and it was actually worn by a slave. Blue, white, red, these three colors. Where have you seen blue, white and red? Of course in the flag of France. Now these are the national colors of France. Clear? The winged woman. Now this woman personifies the law. Okay, she stands for law, and this one is the law tablet. The law is same for all. This law tablet says that the law is same for all, and all are equal before it. Each and every person is equal before this law tablet. So I would like you to take you to the slide where we had our topics enlisted. I hope you have understood the outbreak of the revolution. Let us try to summarize. We see that members of the third estate walk out of the States General. They go into the tennis court in the grounds of Versailles, where they declare themselves as National Assembly and swore not to disperse until they had framed a constitution for the France. Now, what was a very important feature of this constitution? This constitution had to limit the powers of the monarch. Clear? States General, you have already understood, it was a political body which was called upon by the Louis whenever he had to impose a taxes. Clear? Tennis court oath, the oath taken by the representatives of the third estate on 20th June, after which they formed a National Assembly here, after which they form a National Assembly and they draft a constitution in 1791. Now France becomes a constitutional monarchy. We have seen on 4th August 1789 by a decree, France becomes a constitutional monarchy. The king agrees to recognize and accord a political status to National Assembly, and therefore France turns into a constitutional monarchy. What does a constitutional monarchy means? The status of the monarch is ceremonial. It means that it is only the nominal head of the country. The actual power is controlled by the National Assembly or the government, which is chosen by the people, and the powers of the monarch are kept in check with the features of the constitution. So I hope you have followed and enjoyed this lecture. If you have any doubts, kindly keep me posted. Thank you.